Hello, and welcome back. Welcome back. We had an hour break, Leon. We were just talking to George. Rubbish already. Can't say so. I'm so shit. I only spoke to him about 10 minutes ago. We were speaking to George, who directed and wrote and created a film called Gassed Up, which is out on Amazon
Right.
Prime.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
right
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
I'm off camera. Sorry, I'm off camera. And we were just talking about
George
stories that kind
Hunter.
of talk about maybe stories that talk about kind of black boys and crime and stuff like that. I think the conversation Amposa, sorry, I'm said it Amponsa, so I said it wrong, I apologize. But yeah, just stories that talk about kind of more the negative images of aspects of the black community, and just why
Mm,
we often get commissioned, and how hard it was to kind of get other types of programs
mm-hmm.
across. So, yeah, so we just kind of had that conversation, but I hope we don't necessarily need to get into that with you too much. But we'll see. How are you, George? Is wonderful to have you. This is Leon Mayne. He is a script editor. You used to work at the BBC. I'm in their
Yeah.
commissioning department as well. And I know that you had a very successful web series a few years back.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to chop it up and get into all of that stuff. First, thank you for being here and welcome. How are you been? You good?
Yeah. Not too bad. It's been a lot of juggling of work and projects, but we're kind of coming to the tail end of that, so I feel good. I actually feel refreshed now. So
You
yeah, I'm really happy to be here and have a conversation and not feel burdened by anything else right now.
Fantastic. Yeah, as George mentioned, the importance of being present. So let's for an hour just be
Mm,
present, me and you.
of course. Of course.
For you guys, most of you know, if you've got any questions, please put them in the chat or in the question bar. And Leon's here. Obviously, pick his brain if you're particularly if you're an aspiring writing, or if you are a writer and stuck in any
Mm,
area. Leon's here. Pick his brain and ask him. Maybe he can help you and give you some advice. Before we I think obviously the first place to start is understanding a little bit about you and your journey. Your interest into screenwriting. Have you always is that something that you've always been interested in, or did that come at a later stage for you?
Um, it's weird. So I kind of have like there was three moments in my life where I felt I could write or I knew I could write. Storytelling was always a thing for me, but I don't know which part to begin from because it could go really cliche. But when I was young, I was in primary school, and in my English class, basically we were told to write a poem. There was no grades that came with this. You just had to write a poem at the end of the class. It wasn't going to any extracurricular activity or anything like that. And so I wrote the poem and tried to leave because I wanted to play football. And my English teacher brought me back and said, write the poem. And I wrote a poem again. And then I was leaving. She said, bring me back. She said, I want you to write about the river that runs next to our school. And I said, I don't really have any attachment towards the river next to our school, it's the river. But she said, just write something. So I made up like a little, yeah, made a little poem about the river, gave it to her, and she read it for about 30 seconds. And then she looked up and she said, from now on, this is how you write. And it was just because of her reaction that made me think, oh, okay, you can write something to make people feel things. So I ended up kind of continuing writing poetry. Then poetry turned into short stories. And I was very spoiled as a child. I had like Sky and cable in my room for a young age, like chipped cable. And so I had all of the channels. So I watched an insane amount of television. Um, but I'm also African as well. I'm also Ghanaian, and so you got parents that have a specific leeway for what your career is supposed to be. So as much as I had a love for creative writing, it was like going. I went to do more business, but I always had writing as a side hobby. It was just a passion of mine that I enjoyed, and so that writing then turned into a script. And I remember when I turned 16, I wrote a script about um, four guys going to who went to university together. Then they kind of went their separate ways, um, and then they met up again because a friend of theirs passed away, um, and so their meetups became a thing of like going between two storylines. So when they were young and how it kind of shaped who they were now. And I remember writing it, and I didn't really necessarily know the industry, but I sent it into a couple of people, and they were like, "Oh, this is brilliant. You should kind of continue in this vein." So that's what made me kind of want to move more into screenwriting. Um, in addition to obviously just having a ridiculous amount of like quote unquote knowledge of watching TV and being very spoiled.
Mm,
Um, and then yeah, the opportunity to kind of like do something with the writing and turn it into something visual came with the web series with Brothers with
Mhm.
No Game.
Before
So
you go to Brothers with No Game,
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
just want to kind of really acknowledge the importance of someone seeing you, right? So that fact that that
Mm,
teacher believed you or had a reaction in that moment where you thought it was nothing, that can kind of just change the whole trajectory of your life. That sometimes, even when you believe that you can't do something and someone just acknowledges that, oh my God, did you know that you're good at that? And it can just
yeah,
change. It was just so beautiful when you were describing it. I was like, oh my God, that's so powerful to have a teacher just say, no, actually, you're going to write it again. I'm going to push you because I can
yeah.
see there's something there that you might not have acknowledged. Tell us about Brothers with No Game. When did that start? Yeah, just tell us about how that started and how long it was online for, because it was quite in the early days of YouTube, wasn't it? Quite relatively. Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a weird one. So basically, in 2010, I started a blog with my three friends called Brothers with No Game, and we used to write kind of like articles, speaking about relationships and dating from the beta male perspective. So basically, how we failed, and how you could learn from it. And it got a really massive following out the gate. I mean, back then, obviously, social media was present, but it wasn't obviously as mad as it was now, where things become viral just out of nothing. So we were very fortunate that it was getting shared a lot on Facebook, the blogs, and then on Twitter and so on and so forth. And we had 3 million unique visitors in the space of a year, just kind of like
Wow.
reading blogs and articles about like our experiences. Obviously, some of them were exaggerated for entertainment purposes, but we realized that we were able to garner an international audience pretty early, and a lot of our content felt visual because we were paying out scenarios and stories. So at that time, like again, I watched a lot of content in general, but I watched a lot back then. And there were a few web series online on YouTube. In the US, there was web series called Broad City, which ended up being like a big, massive Comedy Central series. Misadventures of Awkward Black Girl, which is Issa Rae's series, came out back then in 2010, 11. And then another project called We Need Girlfriends. And then in the UK, there was a web series called No ID, which was kind of like set in university. So I saw that there was an opportunity to potentially do stuff online. People were watching, and there were people watching in their droves. So we linked up with a guy called Emil Collins, who basically he had a production company, but was mostly non-scripted. You know Emil. Um, and he said, like, I'm a massive fan of your blog. Like, let's try and do something visual with it. So, we took our no experience selves and said, let's do a web series. Um, and then obviously it was an opportunity for me to write again. So I ended up kind of coming up with, characters based on the blog personas that we had. Um, and then created storylines for them. And yeah, just kind of filmed the web series and launched on YouTube in 2012. And then within the first week, we were in The Guardian. And a couple of other web series had come out at the time, like Venus versus Mars and Mandem on the Wall. And there was just this massive like renaissance happening, and it became a thing of did does the people who kind of don't have opportunities to make stuff for television, are we now moving to online where we can have a bit more autonomy and space? um and yeah, the answer to that was yes. And it was a great kind of like communication with an audience straight away because people were leaving comments. And so back then, the way people used to do series is that we would shoot as we were going along. Generally speaking, in television, you kind of like make the series and then you release it. But we were shooting the series as we went along, so we were having like first-hand interaction with our audience, and it was actually helping us shape the story of how our series is going in season one for sure. And yeah, it was just a really really good time, and we were having a lot of people reach out to us and basically say, we'd love to have your show on our platform, so on and so forth. But for me, I think that kind of first-hand engagement and the autonomy was an important thing. So I wanted to at least do another season. And so we did some crowdfunding via our friends and did a second season. And
Wow.
then we got reached out to by London Live,
Yeah.
and they said, we'd love to put your content on TV. We want to acquire your series. Um, and I don't know why I had my business outlet, but I was just like, if this is an acquisition, um, sorry, my door. If this was an acquisition, can it be specifically for UK? Because I know we have an international audience and there's already people who have reached out to us. So we're thinking, kind of thinking ahead in terms of if we have these half an hour episodes, we can now use them as a tool to distribute them to different territories worldwide. That was my thinking. So London Live were on board. So we did an extension of our episodes in season 1 and 2, put it on London Live, then use that as leverage to now distribute our show to different territories worldwide. So up
Mm,
until now, Browsing Our Game, the series, the web series, and now obviously it turned into a TV series, is on TV channels, streaming services, and airlines in over 60 countries worldwide. And it's been great for us because it keeps renewing like every year, which has been
bloody
great.
hell. Oh, no, no,
Um,
no, and you because you kind of said
sorry,
that,
go
like,
on.
you kind of dropped it like, yeah, it's now becoming a TV series. Like we knew that, like that was just kind of like,
No, sorry,
yeah. I
sorry.
mean, like it's like, oh, okay, stop, hold on, pull up. Let's rewind.
Apologies. Sorry,
So,
yeah.
I mean, like it's now becoming a TV series. I mean, so did you
Mm.
back then? Did you have aspirations? Or like once it was on London Live, was that always the aspiration to get it on TV, or were you quite happy on the online space?
So I think I always say when you first start something, that's when you're at your like peak level of optimism. So there was always kind of an end goal of I think this could end up being on television, um, because I was privy to web series. I wasn't privy to like the monetization of the YouTube space. So I didn't know kind of how long we'd be able to do something online because all of us were doing things out of labor of love, including the actors. And the only people that were really getting paid at the time was the sound people and DOP. So I wasn't sure whether we would be able to. Sorry about this. One second.
No, it's real life out here, man. My daughter's gonna do that in a minute. So, you know what I mean? It's real life. It's real life. It's cool. It's cool. Do you know what I mean? We say hi to so you're on mute. Gone. Hmm?
All
Sorry.
right, cool. Um, yeah, sorry. So, because it was labor of love, like it wasn't necessarily 100% sure that we was ever gonna make this be a long-term thing online. But television was definitely a goal. But again, I very much at that point of time was moving with the flow. I was enjoying creating content. Like I wanted to
Mm.
showcase a bit of my skill set in terms of the writing, and I was learning at the same time as well. So television was an end goal, but it was I didn't make it for it to be on television.
So it wasn't
Um,
like that wasn't what the focus was. We're gonna make this and hope to get on TV, but you would hope you kind of dreamed that it would get there, but it wasn't while you were doing what you were doing. You were more about just doing what you were doing because you were loving it and it was getting traction, and we're just gonna keep
exactly,
going.
we had already kind of like built a community, and it was like this was almost like a thank you to the fans as well as honing in on our skill set.
Mm,
Um, but obviously, when the TV opportunity came about, you do start to think bigger. And so, yeah, when the London Live situation came, we're like, okay, this is great. This gets on television. We can potentially have more seasons. And
mm.
also, we can now have a platform for us to distribute work to different territories. So the
So
business
you're
side kind of came up from there. So again,
So no, but you were saying like so it's now kind of a TV series. You're in conversations about it turning it into a TV series. Is that right? Are you able
yeah,
to talk a little bit to that? And like how long has it taken to kind of get it to this point where it's a TV series? And like what is the difference now? Then maybe the I know is London. I don't even know if London Live's still about. I'm sure it is.
probably is, but
Yeah, if it is, sorry.
yeah,
I remember that it was really noisy in London Live. We were all excited, and then it kind of
yeah, then
was
kind
really
of dwindled. Yeah.
but in terms of the way it was on London Live, how different is it now? In terms of like you maybe your relationship to it, the kind of autonomy you have. It'd just be interesting to hear the journey that it's taken and how long it's taken. Mm.
Yeah, so it aired on London Live in 2014, and
10 years. 10 years.
10
Wow.
years, yeah, it's crazy. Time has definitely flown. And I guess it becomes TV like it all as soon as it goes on the platform. But I think it was when we extended the episodes to 30 minutes. So on YouTube, we were creators. But as soon as you're dealing with TV, you're now kind of like a production company. So we had to register ourselves as a production company because we had to do things properly. And we had to film kind of extended scenes um, to make it 30 minutes. And so when you're dealing with that, you kind of have to have a bit more of a business hat on anyway, because there are certain deliverables that you have to achieve in regards to production, sound, music, etc., finances. And I guess like as time has gone on, you kind of have to learn the business as you go along. So there was a bit of winging it at the time because I hadn't learned TV production. I didn't when I went to uni, I did business management and computing. I didn't do television, and so there was a lot of learning as you go along. But there are transferable skills in terms of how you kind of manage a business. Um, and we were fortunate in a sense of a lot of people were coming to us with things as opposed to the other way around. So we can, because we had created something that was doing so well, people were throwing us opportunities, and it was an opportunity for us to have a discussion and learn that process. And so what we did was we started to distribute our shows, but then a company called Trace reached out to us and said, "We'd love for you to do a third season of the show, and it would be on our platform." And so we were like, "Okay, this is an opportunity for us to actually, even though we kind of done it from an acquisition standpoint, we can now start a production properly and do things with television and learn the process." And so they commissioned 10 episodes for a season three of Brothers of No Game, and they gave us a budget to work with. And so we had budgets per episode. And so now we can actually pay the actors and pay for production. And that was kind of like a first proper foray into it. And it was a great relationship. Trace then became our distributors, so we didn't have to like there's so many opportunities for your show to be in different territories and in different spaces. And so we brokered a deal with them that they should go and find us all of the countries and spaces that they could potentially put our show on. And that was a great relationship for 3 years, even up until now. Um, but then the mindset becomes bigger because it's like, okay, we've got this with Trace. I don't want to be known just for Brothers in No Game. I want to make more content. So what can we do? So we kind of did a two-prong offense where we made more projects on our YouTube channel, um, just to kind of hone in on our skills and hopefully maybe get potential deals, but also provide a platform for other creatives. And then we went in a position of we're going to be a full-fledged production company. Let's go straight to the broadcasters and see what we can do. Um, and yeah, the difference is always vast because whereas before people were coming to us, now we're going to them. So we've got to keep proving ourselves. And from there, it's 50-50. You might get a yes, you might get a no. Um, but you learn along the way that a lot of it's to do with relationships. Um, there is a what have you done, which we have done things, but it was a lot about kind of gaining relationships. So where things might not prove to be fruitful now, in a couple of years down the line, it will be because you've kept that relationship going and you've gotten better and you've learned experience and you've honed in on your skills. Um, and so that's kind of like what happened with us. We were still brokering deals for Brothers in No Game. We made a bit more content and was able to distribute. But in terms of kind of going into the bigger spaces, it took a longer time because you're now dealing with bigger entities, more money, um, and up until now we're in a really really good space where we have developments for different broadcasters on both sides of the Atlantic. Um,
Wow.
and yeah, fingers crossed, we can deliver some news very very soon. Um,
And have you got a commission for Brothers with No Game? Is it still in development? Are you able to talk a little bit? Are you kind of is it like guaranteed to be coming back soon, or are we still kind of hoping we're kind of quite
Brothers is
close?
not game itself.
That you said the television series that you were talking about, yeah, that you mentioned. Yeah.
Oh, so the UK one, I think we'll know before the end of the year
Wow.
with that one. And then the US one, it will take a little bit more time because there was kind of like a push because of the strikes.
Mm.
Um, when the riot strikes happened last year, we were in a really, really nice position, a prime position, for this US project. But the riot strike happened, and so like there's been kind of a bit of a cultural reset, um, but which hasn't deterred us at all, but it's just slowed things down a little bit. So maybe in the new year we'll know a little bit more about the US situation.
I want to talk in a minute. I want to talk to you kind of and kind of find out a little bit more about your experience and what you were doing between, in that 10 years of trying to get Brothers
Mm,
No Game to a place that it is. Given the current climate, do you think we're going to see a resurgence of that time where people are pushing content and like what's the difference? Because it just feels like as you were talking, I was like, gosh, it feels like very much the time, or it could be a time prime right now where people are really struggling to get content out there. What are your thoughts? Do you think, you know, given the time now, socials now, YouTube now, is that the opportunity, or do you think it's just such a different place and it's still hard to monetize? Mm.
I think no, that's a good question. I think certainly now, yes. So at our time, it was a really exciting time because a lot of it felt new. So a lot of people were kind of like making web series, and it was kind of like a golden generation of creatives. So obviously you had ourselves and Brothers No Game Lot, then you had Venus versus Mars. You had All About the Mackenzies, Man Them on the Wall, and the funny thing is, like I would say, maybe 80% of the people who made projects around that time ended up being on television, whether it was via um, the web series itself being picked up or the talent themselves being taken onto a new project. Because I remember the Man Them on the Wall guys, they got brought onto Youngers on E4, and they were the same characters basically as Man Them on the Wall. And then the two guys from it, obviously Javan and Percy, went on to make Wall of Entertainment and form their own production company. And then you had All About the Mackenzies, which was kind of a family show, and then that got a run on ITV. So it was a really, really exciting time. But I think what happened was there was a slowing down because people's aspirations became television, and so there weren't as much web series. And then there was a small little renaissance, obviously, again with Hood documentary, with um, Roll Safe, and obviously Michael Dapp had a really, really good run, and then obviously a Johnny with Dream Was Black. Um, and then it kind of slowed again. But the answer to the question is yes. I think that what I will say is, production companies, broadcasters are always looking for talent. There are obviously traditional mediums that they look for talent, theatre, um, podcasts, books, and stuff like that, stand-up comedy. But I think if you are creating content, even if you don't get a look in straight away, you've now got a backlog of content and you've got a backlog of experience that can help you in the longer run. So it's obviously great to kind of go to anybody, an agent, a production company, television and channel, and say, this is who I am. Um, this is this is who I am. This is my talent. But if you've actually got a piece of content to back that up, it can help. People are always looking. Don't If anybody tells you otherwise, it's not true. People are always looking. So I think yes, this is a prime time to create content whilst the industry is figuring itself out. Whilst there's not a lot of money, like create your content. And I'm sure you've heard it time and time again. You can create content with your mobile phone, etc. You really, really can. Like, just kind of like make sure that you are addicted to creating and you're addicted to the craft. And there is a reason why you're doing it. I tend to not work with people whose reason for doing it is because they want to be famous or viral. Like, I need to know that you've actually got a passion for it personally, because it's a long haul, and it's not to say that you listen. I'm not telling anybody if things go wrong and you don't want to do it anymore. Like, that's fine, but I think there's something to be said by a person who's got a passion for it, because you can just see in their work and their craft, and to always stay studious as well. Watch everything. So yeah,
No.
that's a long-winded answer to the
No, no, no,
question,
but
but yeah.
I think that, but those are important points, because I do think that you're right that this isn't there's easier ways to make money, isn't there? So
Oh,
this
for
is
sure, for
it's like
sure,
easier ways to make money, man, and easier ways to make more money than we make, right? Because we most
absolutely.
spend most of our time broke, right? So you have to be really wedded and committed to telling either this story or the art of
Yeah.
storytelling, or committed to something. Otherwise, you're just not going to make it. And if your only commitment is to be famous or to be viral, I don't know how long that energy will last. Not to say it's a bad. I haven't got no judgment about that as an ambition, each to their own. But I just don't know that it will last the test of time. When it gets rough, you might just go say, oh, I'm
Mm.
gonna go work because this thing's long. So I think that those are kind of important lessons. Given like the reality is, and my observations, I could be wrong, is over the last couple of years, most of the things that we've seen on TV have been picked up from online, and particularly when it comes around black content. So those things that are doing pretty okay online, so all that's gone a little bit viral. So we had Blue Therapy, obviously, we've had Dreaming Whilst Black, we've had Juice. A lot of these things have come from online. Do you think that for creators of color, that that's a space that we should be really pouring our energy in, to use it as a place to kind of proof of concept, as a development space, as a development tool. Do you, given that the industry is so unsettled, do you think it might, oh, it might even turn into this kind of, even going a step further, a slight hierarchy where content producers are making content in this space and TV production companies and broadcasters are picking from that for their new ideas and new content or new commissions?
Yeah, so yes, I think that you should, if you want to, and if you have the passion, the tools, the resources for it, then yeah, you should create content online. I wouldn't necessarily say that's the only medium,
Mm,
um, but I think if you kind of want to test yourself in that space, I think creating something online is really what's the word I'm looking for. I think quite integral because at least for me, when I did it, I learned production. And don't get me wrong, it's not the height of production. You know, we're dealing with very very small resources here, but you begin to understand and have a 360 experience about how this all works. And so when you do end up being in a TV space, there is a little bit more confidence. You're doing things on a higher scale, but you've kind of been able to deal with things because you've done it online and done it in production. I remember I was on at the time there's a series on. Can you swear? By the way, I'm not swearing because it's the name of the show. So
yeah.
I, I shadowed on a series called The End of the Fucking World, which was like a Channel 4 Netflix series. And the director on series two was one of the directors on series two was Destiny Ekaraga. She also directed project for Bulag Bajay, a film called Gone Too. No, is it Gone Too Soon? Gone Too Far? Gone
Gone
Too
too far.
Far?
I kind of,
Is it
yeah.
Gone Too Far? So far, yeah. Anyway, so she directed on it, and there was a moment where like they only had half an hour to shoot this scene. Um, and she was so calm on it. Like the production was going crazy, but she was so calm with it. And one of the major reasons why she was calm, outside of just her general demeanor on set, is that she's dealt with that type of quote unquote pressure doing stuff online. Like
Right.
we're doing guerrilla filmmaking online. So back like when we were doing stuff online, it's all guerrilla filmmaking. But it kind of sets you up for certain scenarios where you don't feel that pressure because it's like, yeah, we can get this shot because that's all we could afford to get. And so I really kind of like, I mean, that's just like one little minor example, but it does help when you do stuff already because then it kind of sets you up in some circumstances for the future.
Mm,
The Right now, in my humble opinion, I think TV has a real bondage with IP. Like if somebody has written a book or they've got a podcast or a play, um, there is an opportunity for them to move into television. And so when I look at kind of like the creators of color right now, I'd say maybe more than 50% of the shows that we see on TV has come from IP. So
that's what I'm
like
saying.
the projects that you mentioned, and then obviously Queenie and Champion came from Candice doing her book. Um, Mood came from Nicole Lecky's play, um, and so on and so forth. And so I think I have my like pros and cons with it because it's great that you can make content um, and then it goes online. But obviously, part of the con is those, not a con, but one of the cons is just like for people who are doing stuff specifically for TV, it feels like it's become a little bit harder because it feels like you kind of have to have an example of a certain level of success or audience grabber before you can get onto
I think
TV.
that's what I'm asking you. I think that right
Yeah,
there is really what I'm asking you is
yeah,
whether that's
and
the reality for Black creators. That's what I'm
I
asking.
think that is the reality, and it's something that I'm kind of like trying to fight against in all my spaces. Because when I was at BBC Drama, I had the same thought process of like, yes, this should definitely be a way to get into TV, but there are still people who are specifically writing for TV that aren't getting their green lights, and it's like, why are you not giving these people an opportunity when they've kind of focused their whole life on that particular space, or focused a certain period of their life on that particular space? So it's a really interesting space right now where IP seems to be king, and it's not even just for creators of color. It just seems across the board IP, IP, IP.
Yeah, I
Um,
agree.
there is an aspect of laziness right now in television where it's like, we're gonna go for something that's already been an audience grabber. as opposed to let's nurture this new generation of talent. Um, so yeah, not to obviously put a downer on anybody listening in, but IP is definitely strong right now. Um, but I'm always kind of optimistic. Sorry.
But if you can create IP, then it's kind of like it is what it is for the minute. And I wonder in the next couple of years whether that's going to change really, because what the future of TV is. I mean, it's up for debates, but it's interesting and things are moving online. So, do you think that it's likely to swing back where TV will want to nurture writers? And I know you worked quite for a while in BBC writing and BBC drama, so you was at the coalface of understanding and nurturing talent and coming up with
Yeah,
ideas and being in that process. So, having been in that space and kind of really inside and knowing how this works, and given the kind of overview of what's happening in the current climate, what's your thoughts? Do you think that there will be space for TV writers just to be writing TV stuff, or do we all have to migrate online to get noticed to then come back to TV? What's your thoughts?
TV is like, for better or worse, very cyclical. So something could be popping right now for like for 2 years, and you're like, okay, cool, I've got to pivot this way, and then you start making content, and all of a sudden, we're not looking for that anymore. And one of the perfect examples right now is comedy drama. So especially, I think it's a massive thing amongst like people of color, and then certainly like a specific age group where comedy drama is just that sweet spot for television viewers. um, where something can be funny but have a kind of dramatic storyline, or something can be extremely serious but be very comedic. And what's happening right now, and I'm seeing the tide turning, it started this year. A lot of broadcasters want one or the other. So it's either comedy or it's either drama. And it can be comedy drama if it's based off of IP. So like if a stand-up comedian has had a dope career or show or whatnot, and then he's given a TV series, that can be comedy drama, or she could be comedy drama. But if you're a writer that's coming and saying, I'm going to make a comedy drama, they're like, oh, we're not too sure. So BBC, Channel 4, etc., their comedy departments, they want straight comedy. They want a laugh every other second. Even in America now, they kind of they're not as like rigid as British comedy right now, but in America the tide is turning as well. And there's also now debates now about shows that are seen as comedy. So I don't know whether you know about you've watched the Emmys, but the Bear won a few things for comedy, and that's the Bear is an extreme example because the Bear is really not a comedy. It's a drama, but it's because it's half an hour. I guess it's been put into that comedy series, but there's backlash against it winning so many awards because you don't necessarily laugh at that show. It's a great show, but you don't necessarily laugh at it. So I think TV is gonna do less comedy dramas for the next couple of years. Then in 2 years' time, they'll be like, we want comedy dramas again. So
Do you think TV will be around in a couple of years' time?
I think yes, because I think TV will be around. I'm not sure how many channels will be around.
Mm.
So Channel 4 was a really interesting one because like I know it was nearly going to go into administration, but then it was saved, and I think technically speaking that suggests that people still want to see television. Um,
How long
maybe
ago
Channel
was it
4.
going to go into administration? Yeah.
I don't know if it was this year or last year, but it was
Wow.
kind of like on the precipice of that, and so you know that got saved. And I know that's partly because it's the institution, but I still think people do want to watch TV. And there is now this kind of debate between whether people want to binge watch a show or if they're going back to watching stuff weekly. And people are watching things weekly again. So TV will still always be there as a medium, but online is never dying because everybody watches stuff online. What I find interesting now, though, is that the streaming services in the UK, they are the real creators of IP. So they want the big names, the known talent, etc. And so as much as they're gonna be there forever, I actually don't know whether they are always the right platforms to nurture new talent. Whereas
Mm,
the broadcasters are doing a much better job, even though, everybody can improve, but the broadcasters are doing a much better job of trying to bring in new talent. There's opportunities at BBC. There will be opportunities at Channel 4. And I can't necessarily say the same for Netflix, Apple, and Amazon. Um, you look at most of their slates, it's kind of the big names, the big IPs. You do have like one-offs, so to speak, like Ratman, obviously for Superstar. Although you could argue that came off of the back of Blue Story breaking records and Shiro's Story having ridiculous amount of viewership online. So it's not necessarily always a thing of like with the streamers where it's like, okay, well, we're going to build and develop this talent. No, we're going to go for the big names. We're going to go for this because they probably will bring the subscribers. Whereas the
mm,
broadcasters can take a quote unquote risk and be like, yeah, you know what, we actually want to have a variety. And BBC as a space, they're lucky because they commission the most out of everybody in the country. So therefore, they have an opportunity to be like, if there's like 20 slots that they can fill, at least a quarter of those can be new first time rise. And I think
mm.
they are actually working towards that. So cyclical. So TV is cyclical. So whatever you have a passion for, stick to it because it might come back round again. But ultimately, as creatives and creators, you've always got different ideas. So you might have a different idea that works for now. And if it doesn't work for now, it will work for the next cycle. Or you might be like, I really want to do this, but oh, I also have this on the back burner. Let me
Mm.
put this through because that's what's popping now. Because that's how I've got a current development myself as a writer, and that was my third choice. Like I was pushing two projects beforehand that like I had more passion for, so to speak, but they wanted the third option, and so I'm developing that. So
You kind of just go with, just kind of, and like I think that idea that no idea is a bad idea, right? It's just around timing.
yeah,
That when it's a bad idea today, but then next week something happens, and then all of a sudden it becomes a good idea. So it's kind of nurturing those ideas. And
hmm
guys, please get involved in the conversation. And like I say, put questions in chat and in the question bar. What did you learn? What did you do at the BBC? So you went in the time that you've been kind of developing stuff on your own and kind of on the, I don't want to call it a side hustle because I don't want to minimize what you've been doing because you've been doing quite sensational stuff. But your kind of
mm.
main full-time job has been at the BBC and kind of as a job in or working in different places. What have you learned? Firstly, tell us what you've been doing or some of the jobs that you've had, and tell us some of the lessons that you've learned.
Yeah. So I joined BBC at a time in 2020. I joined them during the pandemic. So as you can imagine, when the pandemic hit and you can't really do any like freelance work and you can't really do production and whatnot, or create per se, it's like, okay, I need to kind of get a job, don't I? Proper like full-time job, so to speak. And so I joined. I got. I heard about like a role going on at BBC Drama, which at the time the role was called a commissioning coordinator, and essentially you'd be reading scripts um, and doing script reports. And so I was like, all right, cool. You know what? I'll do that. It'll be an interesting kind of way in to see how BBC works. And then when I had my interview, and then I had to read a script that was being greenlit, I think it ended up being Red Rose, a show called Red Rose. Um, when they found out more about like my journey, they said, "Oh, okay, we need you to do more than this. Like, would you mind being across our developments as well?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course." So I joined BBC um, 2020, and my experience there in the drama commissioning team was just learning how that whole system works. Um, and people would submit ideas, and I look across the submissions and see what it is that worked alongside what the head of drama wanted. And you had to make some really great decisions and also really tough decisions. Um, I'd see across their developments as well, so help with development notes for their projects, and then obviously notes as well for greenlit projects for the channel. And it was a really eye-opening kind of like experience to knowing what the commissioners go through whilst they're there. Before I joined BBC, I had a very specific thought process about commissioners.
What was that?
I
Share that quickly. Share whatever.
I just thought they were. useless. Like, because it was always these excuses of, well, we've got something like this in development. It's like, why are you not commissioning these type of programs? Why are you not allowing these type of talent to come through, etc. And I can't speak for every other channel. I can only speak for BBC. BBC, because they welcome so many commissions, they have an insane amount of submissions from writers and producers, etc. And so when I first read, I think they only had 6 commissions in drama. I think they've got 8 now. You're getting in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of scripts like per month, thousands a year. It's really, really hard to dedicate your time to all of those submissions, plus all of the shows that are in development, plus all the shows that are greenlit. It's just really hard. So I I have a bit more sympathy for them in regards to kind of how they share their workload, how long they get back. And one thing I used to always hate was when commission would be like, "Oh, we've got something like this in development," and be like, "Yeah, sure you do." So that's an excuse. But at BBC, they probably do have something like that in development because they get so many things. And
Mm.
but I don't necessarily feel there's anything new under the sun. It's just the person, the voice behind the script. It's their
Okay.
experience, and so it's something that whilst I was there, I encouraged also. But yeah, it was really, really good to know the landscape, know who the writers were, some really, really excellent stories, and understand as well from a writing perspective, like how important story and structure is, because you can have a voice, you can have a talent, that idea, but if you've not honed in on the story and that structure, which I think a lot of kind of writers fall on, it doesn't necessarily always go through to development, let alone green light. So it was really, really interesting from that standpoint. It was really cool to help shape the type of talent that were coming in. And BBC are very, very knowledgeable about who is out there. Like they're super knowledgeable about who is out there. It's just about kind of fine tuning the the vision of what they wanted. So we have, I say we, I'm not with them no more. They have a new head of drama called Lindsay Salt, who used to work at Sky and Netflix, and she's come and she's really kind of shaped the team. Like she hired a black commissioner in Danielle Scott Horton, um, hired an Asian head of development in Samuel Hadi, and a young producer in Nick Lambon. So the team feels much more eclectic and a bit younger and fresher as well, while still kind of keeping to the sensibilities of BBC's older fan base as well. Because we were just discussing TV and online. TV does get watched by a lot of people above the ages of like 45, 50, etc. So um, yeah, it was a really, really good experience and learning it from that side and being like, okay, cool. I now understand what commissioners wants and needs, their patterns. Um, and just like us, they are tastemakers. They watch a lot of TV, but they also have remits to fill as well in regards to their audiences. Um, so yeah, I spent like 3.5 years with them, and it was great to help me in terms of my development and writing skills because I was always writing and developing, no matter what I was doing. I was just writing and developing ideas because that's like my first and major passion. But obviously, because of what I did with stuff like Brothers in No Game, I ended up having so many different skill sets. So I could write, I could produce, I could develop, I could script edit, I could direct. And so I would always take on little small jobs here and there because of the skill sets that I took on. And one of the skill sets was script editing, obviously knowing and understanding story and structure and getting people's voices. And so I got reached out to by Ajani and Big Deal Films because Jimmy Was Black obviously was going to be on television to be a script editor on there. And I said, yeah, sure, man, let's make it happen. So I ended up being a script editor on that whilst working at BBC. Um, Conflict, not really, because it was BBC comedy, so it didn't matter. Um, and that was obviously a really, really good experience, and it was received quite well, and really excited for them for season two. I didn't join on season two because I ended up joining World Productions, who are the production company behind shows like Line of Duty and Bodyguard. Um, and I was script editor on season two of an ITV thriller called Malpractice. We're just about to finish wrapping up on Friday, which is
Mm.
great. That's been a very long 5 months because I joined in April.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I helped a stand-up comedian called Ola Labib develop her idea of like life she used to work at a pharmacy, so she wanted to do like a comedy surrounding that. So I
Mm.
helped her with the pitch for that. Channel 4 picked up the pilot for it, and now they've hired
Wonderful.
me to help her with the pilot. So yeah, so yeah,
Wow.
I get busy. I get busy, and then obviously I got
Loving this. Hold on. We've got a question. Hold on. We've got a
so,
question. Let me show this
so
question on a stage. Please, guys, if you've got any other questions, please call it out with this question from Natty. What stands out most when you read a script or unique point do you look for? What unique point do you look for in a script?
so personally, this is my personal. It's not necessarily what everybody looks for, but my personal thing is I look for voice. So, and I think part of that is because I read so many scripts. So it's like ultimately, I could read 500 scripts a year, and the thing that stands out to me is always like, has do I see a person's voice in this particular script? Like, what's unique about this particular story? Yes, but how is this person writing that story? And so, some of my favorite writers are like people like Aaron Sorkin and Steve Zalian and Donald Glover. They just have a particular voice that only they can write that. So like if you were to present like a particular scenario and you put like 10 writers in front of it, they probably all write from a different perspective, but there's just something that unique that takes them over the line. So voice is really important. I think I do say this though, if you're first coming into writing, learn the basics in terms of like story structure and whatnot. Do that first and then put your voice and twang into it.
Oh, wow.
Because I think for the most part, sorry, broadcasters, they're looking for the specific beat points. So they want the emotional threads and they want the narrative arcs. So like if you get the story and structure right, you're already in good stead, and then you add your voice in it to really make it unique. Um, and that's the same kind of methodology that I do when I'm building characters as well when I'm writing in terms of I don't add like a gender or sex to any of my characters when I'm first developing them. I ask 15 questions about each character that I'm writing, and it stems from like obvious stuff in terms of aesthetic and what they would wear from Monday to Friday and Saturday to ambiguous stuff like what would they do if they won the lottery, and in between is just stuff in terms of socioeconomic status, philosophy on life and love, etc. And you're just building a three-dimensional person, and then after that, I'll add the nuances that make them who they are. Well, those nuances already help, but like I'll add different things to make them who they are. So I always encourage kind of like writers who are coming through to do that. But short answer to your question, voice. Voice is really important to me. Like I need to know what makes you stand out um more than everybody else outside of just it being a dope story.
Mm. The voice, and I'm not a writer. I grew up in a factual space. So how
Mm.
would a voice kind of come through? That might be a really stupid question,
No, it's not a
maybe.
super question.
Yes. But how, what is the how? What are the kind of ways that you can make your voice come through? Or firstly, what is the voice, and how do you make it come through? What do you mean you say voice? Break that down for me just a little bit more, so that for the
No, of
factual.
course.
Mm.
So it could be as that there's multiple ways. It could be as something as um simple as the way you describe action in a scene or in an episode. There's obviously the basic way to be like, and then this happens and this happens. But I think the way especially going in with the tone of your show. So if you're making a comedy drama, if you're making a drama, if you're making a horror, there's a certain tone beats that I think you need to hit. And if you can make them in your own voice, like when I'm doing a comedy drama, I make my descriptions just as funny as the dialogue because I want the reader to be taken on a ride and them to know my sense of humor. And it just enables them to like all the people reading or the broadcasters to know that, oh, okay, cool, this person really knows their stuff. They've got a particular voice. This is their tone, this is their style, so it can never be, not that it can't be replicated, but
They're
it can't
confident.
be
You got, yeah. I get it. I
it
get
can't
it.
be misconstrued, be like, okay, this is that
Mm,
person's voice. And then obviously
mm.
it's dialogue. Obviously you have to write dialogue um that is for your particular characters. um but I think it's just stylistically in the way you make that comedy. I'll use a really like Succession, for example. The way Jesse Ferguson or his team make Roman say his specific words, the nuances that I added in. I know part of that is kind of like ad lib, but there are things that you can put in people's sentences that are only specifically for that character. But it made me think that he really thought about the way that characters speak, his intonation, how he's going to deliver that line. So it's not just, and then again, I'm not saying it's people, other people write formulaically, they don't, but like it's not that thing of like this is this person's dialogue and then this is that person's dialogue. You can tell the difference between that person's dialogue and that person's dialogue. It's making like the voices distinctive, but then
Mm.
and it showcases what your voice is. It's like, okay, you truly understand that this is the way this character speaks. So I really like the way that's done. And then even when you're doing treatments as well, like before you even get to script stage, if I can see a, because that's where you can probably have even more of a voice. Again, it harps to whatever your genre is, but if I'm reading a comedy treatment, to me the treatment should be funny because that's what you're going to be showcased to be. I know the you know, obviously make sure you make people understand the premise, but you could put in a joke here or there. Like I want to read, like I want to get to know the person because this industry is all about getting to know the person anyway. So it's one thing to have obviously like a adult kind of like basic premise, but if you can add your voice and your character in there, it's like okay,
Mm.
cool. I'm really getting to know this person just through their work alone, and this person's unique. This person's got a voice. This person can stand out and kind of like be part of a generation and not necessarily just copy what you've already seen on TV.
So allowing your personality essentially to shine through in your way, not being frightened or not being shy, or even if it's not personality, but just the way you, yeah, I totally, that makes more sense to me. We've got another question. I don't know what
What's
happened
that?
there. Oh, it's me. Sorry. Same from Natty. Is there specific templates that you follow, or is there or any that are available out there that you could advise? And I was also going to ask about
Oh,
writing or any starting resources for those who want to kind of hone their
oh,
writing. Mm.
I'll answer your one quickly and then I'll hopefully that answers. Is it Natty? What's the name?
Yes, Natty. Yeah, yeah. Mhm.
The questions are so in terms of books. So for TV writing, I always found The Anatomy of Story by John York. It's called The Anatomy of Story. I think he's got another one coming called Anatomy of Genre. I really want to read that. The Anatomy of Story is really, really helpful in regards to knowing and understanding story structure and genre. And I think that's really helped me in regards to kind of how I write out seasons or ideas for seasons. So that's a really, really important book. There's Story by Robert McKee as well, which is pretty good. It's just
We've
called
been doing a
Story.
course like that. I think we all worked in BBC documentaries years ago. We all had to do a Robert McKee story thing on storytelling. He does these masterclasses on storytelling, and it
Yeah,
was blew
it's
my mind.
very, yeah, it's a lot to take in. The book is a lot to take in. So maybe you can get audio or watch. I think he does a couple things on YouTube, but that's a really, really good one. Aaron Sorkin's masterclass. You know, they got their videos, the masterclass. His one's really, really cool. I think Shonda Rhimes has one as well, but his one is really cool. So those are like, you know, kind of your quote unquote educational things. And in terms of like writing templates, so as I was explaining with characters, there's 15 questions, and I'm happy to send those. I'll email those to anybody who wants. Like,
Please do.
there's 15 questions I ask about each character that I create that's important to the story. And yeah, again, it's just ties into socioeconomic status. It ties into um, philosophy on life, love, etc., relationships with people over the course of the season, some a secret that they might be hiding from people that nobody else knows, and it just helps you to create a three-dimensional person. And again, like I said, I don't add in the sex or gender at that stage. I'm just trying to make a three-dimensional person, and that's really important for people who, for men who write female characters and for female who write men characters, to try and not be too stereotypical. So if you're building a three-dimensional person at first, you kind of now know or have an idea of how that person speaks, what their interactions and dynamics are with people before you even add the gender on there. I think that's important. Um,
Sorry, this question popped up
so
with, I don't know how it did that. It just did this on its own. Thank you for that. I think that's really helpful. And if you could send us those questions as a template. I think that'd be really useful. Just a reference point for people to have, and we can attach it to the resources of this session. Previously heard that I shouldn't be too descriptive in my script because the detail is left for the director. Is this true, or should I focus more on expressing my voice, as you mentioned?
So the answer to that is yes and no. So you shouldn't be too descriptive. Um, and when I talk about voice, I'm more talking about like almost having a conversation with you. If I'm being the script, I'm presuming when they say being descriptive in terms of like giving a paragraph before a dialogue's even been said, and this happens and that happens, and this person is a bit like this, like that might feel a little bit too descriptive. But in terms of kind of if you've got, trying to think of a quick example. Um, if you've got like, so even for this, all right, so there's an opening scene, right, where basically you could potentially just write summer, right? So that people know that space is in summer. And that's fine. Like if you haven't got a lot of space to write and you just put summer, great. But you could also put summer, um, not necessarily a heat wave, but enough for, so I'm trying to figure this example because I remember writing it one time. It was summer, not not necessarily a heat wave, but hot enough to have the tabloids leave something on the front pages. I can't remember. It was something to do with that. But it was just a quick sentence to showcase you what type of summer it is. So it's not too hot, but it's hot that people that tabloids whenever it hits like over 21, people think it's hot. I mean, it's relatively hot, but it's not that hot.
Mm,
It's just something like that, just to give you like a little bit of a voice, and then you can go into it. It can still just write summer if you want, but I mean, just in terms of that, like just something that gives you a tiny little bit of voice, a tiny little bit of description, and then you go into it. But don't be over descriptive. the- Descriptive, sorry. I think that if it's a directorial thing, that could be more to do with the actions, because the director's not going to have anything to do with the heat wave, so to speak. I mean, it's lighting, so to speak, but they're not going to have anything to do with that. So it might be more in terms of like what the characters are doing as opposed to the lay of the land,
mm. Did
if
that
that makes
answer? I
sense.
hope that answered the question. We are bang on 4 o'clock, and I know that we come back again at 5 to talk to Rajas Find about defiance, fighting the far right, and his career and stories of that kind of nature. Leon, you've been amazing. I've learned a lot and
Thank
actually
you.
quite inspired. I want to go and get one of those books. So I have a story in my head that I've had for years that I want to write, and now I feel slightly more confident in knowing where to start. So I'm gonna get one of those audiobooks and have a listen. Thank you so much. It's been really insightful.
No
And I do
problem.
wonder, with the time that it is, we did a session a couple of days ago on mobile phone use and how you can use your mobile use phones are being used in filmmaking. And it's absolutely mind blowing.
Mm,
And it makes it a lot more accessible to be able to make your content, right? Because you don't need all this kind of expensive content, expensive resources in order to do it. I'm with you,
yeah,
Leon. Just be passionate, get out there and make some content, man, and get back
just
in,
do
fall
it,
back in
man.
love. Yeah,
Yeah,
fall back in love with the joy of making the content because you want to tell this story and trust that it will
facts.
get to where it needs to be, and it kind of,
Yeah,
in a funny kind of way, finds its way. Yeah, do we agree?
agreed. 100%.
Yeah, wonderful,
No
wonderful. I think
problem, Natty.
last, yeah, Natty. Thank you. I think that Natty sums up exactly how all of us feel. That was really good, very insightful. Thank you, Leon.
I
And we look forward
appreciate
to
you.
seeing
Thank
you
you.
guys in an hour. So if you're interested in making those kind of hard hitting documentaries about issues that happen in our community, this one's not one that you want to miss. See you guys in an hour. Thanks, Leon. Speak to you guys soon.
No
Bye.
problem.